Now that we're past Super Mario Kart, we can finally get started with this full series with Mario Kart 64. Mario Kart 64 is not exactly one of my favorites, and that's probably because I just didn't really grow up with it. This is basically what I've been thinking for the past, I don't know how many years I've been playing this game. This is pretty much my entire history with Mario Kart 64. I thought it was a good game, had some good tracks, fun characters. It's just an okay game. But that's not really to underplay what Mario Kart 64 is. It is a fantastic upgrade from Super Mario Kart with voice lines, 3D tracks, some fun new items. There's a lot to like about Mario Kart 64, and that's especially in the track department. I think it has a lot more personality than the previous game, mostly due to the fact that they're all actually their own unique courses, instead of just being the same thing 4 times in a row. So without further ado, let's begin our ranking of every single track in Mario Kart 64. Sitting at dead last is gonna be quite a controversial one, and that is going to be number 16, Rainbow Road. There is a lot of things that you can describe this track. Majestic, breathtaking, absolutely nostalgic. That's if you grew up with the game. Because for me, it's just way too long and way too boring. There is a lot of problems with this track. First off, the length. Normally, an average track would take around, say, a little over 2 minutes to complete in 150cc. Which absolutely should be the average. The average for Rainbow Road? Nearly 6 minutes! That is absolutely ludicrous compared to other tracks. That's pretty much triple the length of what it should be. And normally I would excuse this if maybe there's some kind of special gimmick with it, but no, it's mostly just a bunch of straight lines with not a whole lot of obstacles. There are these chain chomps that show up occasionally, but other than that, it's just really boring. It doesn't really help that there's a bunch of guardrails that protect you from falling off. Probably because of complaints of the Super Mario Kart track, when that didn't have any kind of guardrails at all. But the whole track? That's just too easy. You would actually actively have to go out of your way in order to fall off this track. This is, unfortunately, one of my least favorite Mario Kart tracks of all time. 15. Sherbet Land. Again, this also has a similar problem to Rainbow Road, where it's just really boring. The entirety of the track is basically made of ice. Think of it maybe being just Antarctica, where really the only obstacles there are just the penguins, and that's it. Sure, there's icicle pillars in the cave, but there's not really a whole lot to go off of from that, and are very easily avoidable. There really isn't a whole lot to really say about this track. I just wish that it was a lot more engaging than other tracks in this game. 14. Wario Stadium. This again has a similar issue to what Rainbow Road has, but the opposite of what Sherbet Land had, in that it's just way too long. I honestly kind of wish that this was remade in 8 Deluxe because, well, I think a remake would definitely benefit. Not only making this like a 3-section course so it could be a lot shorter, but it honestly would be a lot of fun given its trick system. But yeah, all these ramps are just really slowing you down, and I'm not a fan of old games doing that, especially in Mario Kart. The most I can really engage from this track is that Wario's face is plastered all over the border, which is something Wario would definitely do. But other than that, it's really long. The lack of a trick system in the old games just really watered this down. So yeah, it's really boring and way too long. Oh boy, this might be another controversial take. Number 13, Calamari Desert. I have never been a fan of this course. Not really a fan of it in 7, not really a fan of it in Tour, and no, I was not really that big of a fan of it in 8 Deluxe either, though it has been growing for me in that game. In this game, it's just, well, again, too boring. It's a mostly flat course. I think the aesthetics really aren't that great, and the train, look, I know people gush about the train in this game sometimes, but come on, just be honest, it's way too intruding on the stage sometimes. I just think it sucks that you have to wait until the train passes you until you can move on. Like, I'm sorry, just having a game mechanic where I have to stop driving? No thank you. I'd rather play the track. I guess one enjoyment I can get out of this track is that the shortcuts can be pretty insane sometimes. I'll admit that. But other than that, it's a pretty boring and dull course, and not one that I'm really excited to see come back on an occasion. 12. Toad's Turnpike. Another track that I've never really been that big of a fan of. Wow, really, I am not a fan of the N64 tracks, am I? The problem I have with Toad's Turnpike is that it's just too busy and not that fun. And the design of the course just really isn't that special, with it just being a figure 8, something that is very common theming in Mario Kart. And also, I just don't understand how this is supposed to be Toad's Turnpike. Like with the other tracks, I can really understand how they theme with the characters. With Toad, I'm not really sure what's really going on here. Thankfully, future Toad courses have actually bothered to make it themed around the little guy, but this one just doesn't. I'm never really excited to play this course, and no, this will not go away in the future. Just you wait. 11. Luigi Raceway. Okay, now we're getting to the tracks that I mildly like. This one being the first track that you'll play in the game, and it's pretty alright. It's just your standard raceway and /or circuit course, so it's nothing really too special to go off of, but hey, it could be a decent time, honestly. Seeing the little billboard when you go into the tunnel is pretty cool. That little air balloon that gives you just a broken item each time you go in it, like, that's just fun. I don't have a whole lot to say about this track. It's just a genuinely fun time that I wouldn't really mind coming back to on an occasion, especially when booting up the game again for who knows how long. 10. Moo Moo Farm. This is another one that I'm not really too into, but can be a little bit of fun on replay. It's basically just a circle, but there is something in this track that makes it a little more interesting. You see, if you go in the outer space of this track, you're safe for the most part. You won't really run into too many things. But if you go on the inside of the track, there is these little holes that have Monty Moles popping up here and there, which can make the track much more interesting. Do you risk going into the middle and potentially get hit by Monty Moles, or do you go the safe route and just go in the outer ring of it? It's something you're gonna contemplate, and I think it's a lot of fun. So, not really too into it, can be a little boring occasionally, but I think it's an overall fun time. Wouldn't mind this coming back to another Mario Kart game one of these days. 9. Mario Raceway. My thoughts for this track are basically the same for Luigi Raceway, but I think it's a little more interesting. Some more shortcuts you can take, a large pipe tunnel, a Mario Go sign. Yeah, I don't know. I just think this track is a lot more fun to play on. There isn't really too much to talk about with this one. It's Mario Raceway, you know it. It's a lot of fun. 8. Frappe Snowland. This is another one that's kind of nostalgic for me, back when I played Mario Kart DS, and actually, wait, how old am I again? But yeah, this one's a lot of fun too. The main thing that I really get from this track is the little river at the bottom from the bridge, the snowmen that are lying around, the giant Mario snowman, and the huge snow walls that encapsulate you within it. So yeah, not really too much to say, and really that's kind of a thing with this game. There really isn't a whole lot to talk about these tracks. I just think it's a lot of fun. Heck, I'd actually wouldn't mind it coming back in a future Mario Kart game. Maybe with a huge revamp like Mario Kart 8 does with his tracks. 7. Koopa Troopa Beach. This one's also kind of nostalgic for me, back when I played Mario Kart 7. Though, I think it's definitely a whole lot better in that game than it is here. But either way, it's still pretty fun. There's this huge ramp that you can take that will absolutely make you feel powerful if you land it. There's this one shortcut we have to go over a giant rock, but it's basically impossible. I think the track is just a huge vibe with its beach. Nintendo never really failed in those kind of tracks, so not really a whole lot to complain about here either. Just a generally fun track that I wouldn't mind coming back to. 6. Royal Raceway. This one's actually a little more interesting than the previous raceways, with it being themed around Peach more so than Mario and Luigi. Though it's kinda weird that they didn't have Peach's name on there, but whatever. There's a giant castle that you go around, there's a couple of shortcuts you can take, there's this big jump that you can take in between with all these hot air balloons and lake. And yes, you can even visit Princess Peach's castle from Mario 64. Genuinely still one of the coolest Easter eggs that Nintendo has ever implemented. Oh yeah, and also this track has some insane world record history. I highly recommend checking it out. So yeah, overall, fun track, not a lot to talk about, but with a cool Easter egg, bumping it up by a lot. Trust me, I probably would have put this lower than Mario Raceway if I'm being honest. 5. Choco Mountain. So this one's kind of a weird one. Do I really like it this much? Probably not. But there's just plenty of things that I like within the track that makes it go up a lot. For one, I really like the Grand Canyon theme with this track. Okay, that's probably not what they were going for, but it's kind of the vibe that I get from it. The music in this track specifically is really good. I think it's probably my favorite track in the game, other than Rainbow Road. I don't know, I'm just kind of a sucker when it comes to country music and video games. I mean, I'm a Banjo-Kazooie fan for Christ's sake. But I think this track is also a lot of fun. The falling boulders is also a really good obstacle. I think these last few ramps are probably actually a lot better than Wario Stadiums, mostly because they're not constant like Wario Stadiums. And also with how foggy the track is, just gives a vibe that you don't really get from a whole lot of tracks. It's definitely completely different than the 1/8 Deluxe, and I'm kind of glad it is. And yeah, honestly, a surprisingly fun course, and I wouldn't mind revisiting it whenever playing this game again. 4. DK's Jungle Parkway. Okay, I actually like this track a lot, honestly. So first off, it has a jungle theme, which is something that Donkey Kong surprisingly doesn't have a lot in his tracks. Really, the only other one that we got was, well, DK Jungle. Though I'm kind of still confused on what the Parkway part of this track is, but whatever. The music is definitely a vibe when it comes to this track. It really does add to the jungle theming. If you go off-road, coconuts will be flown at you to get back on the track, which I think is a really nice touch. Kinda wish the Wii version had that too. Drawbridge is cool. I really like the inside of the cave. Also has some insane world record history. It's honestly just a lot of fun. Easily the highlight of this track is the big jump with that fairy that shows up on an occasion. This track's honestly a lot of fun and kind of underrated in my opinion. People should really highlight this track more, and I think it definitely deserves a revamp like in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. 3. Yoshi Valley. This one's honestly just kind of hilarious. This is definitely one of the most robust Mario Kart tracks of all time, with there being so many ways you can take this track, and none of them really being the wrong way on face value. There are some turns that are like, yeah, of course you want to go for them, but really, there's no wrong way to really go. It's honestly just kind of a choose your own adventure kind of track, something you don't really get a whole lot of in Mario Kart, if at all besides Yoshi Valley. But the one thing that is really making this track for me is the fact that this track just does not know where you are in Grand Prix. I am not sure why this happens. I don't know if anybody does, but it's honestly just so hilarious and makes the track that much more suspenseful. This is honestly a really fun track, and the giant Yoshi egg only adds to it. Honestly, I really like this track, and I'm really glad it came back in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. It got a huge uplift in that regard. 2. Bowser's Castle. There are very few Bowser's Castle tracks that can even capture the menacing atmosphere that this one does. Some of the latest Bowser Castles are definitely bad, but the old ones, they were absolutely menacing and no nonsense. And that is especially the case with the N64 version of this one. There's thwomps everywhere trying to squish you. There's lava everywhere. There's a giant spiral in the end with a big jump. There's a Bowser statue that's breathing fire trying to get you. Though it's actually kind of impossible for you to hit, but whatever. And the music. Oh, the music. With it just being some quiet ambience and a choir. A very haunting choir, mind you. There's just so much about this track that I love, and I'm really hoping this comes back one of these days. It can honestly be one of the scariest tracks Nintendo could ever make if this ever gets a remake. And finally, number 1. Probably the most controversial take that I'll ever have in this series. Banshee Boardwalk. So, you might be asking, Voss, what are you thinking? This track doesn't really have a whole lot. But I say, nah, this track has plenty. First off, the atmosphere is honestly just so creepy. Something that Mario Kart doesn't really have very often. Hell, this is something that the Mario series doesn't have in general nowadays. but with the bone-chilling music, the giant fish that comes out on occasion, the bats, the haunted house, the spray paint, the very creaky boardwalk, the very easily fall-offable boardwalk. Hell, I don't know where I found this from, but there was a headcanon that are boos lighting up the candles so that they won't hear any more victims fall off this course. Absolutely raw. That honestly uplifts this track a lot. I know a lot of people won't agree with me, and maybe it's because of my nostalgia of the version on DS, but I like this track a lot. I really hope this comes back one of these days. It desperately needs a remake. So yeah, that does it for my ranking of every track in Mario Kart 64. You probably have noticed throughout this entire ranking, but I didn't really have a whole lot to say about any of these tracks. And I think that's just kind of what's unfortunate for me with Mario Kart 64. I just don't really get a whole lot of enjoyment out of these tracks that everybody else does. And that's mostly because that I grew up with the later Mario Karts like DS, Wii, 7, and eventually I would play 8 a lot, especially 8. I absolutely love 8 Deluxe. But Mario Kart 64 is one that I just think is kind of okay. It must have been fantastic at the time, I just know it, but for me, it's just not it. I think it's honestly just okay compared to the other ones, and it definitely hasn't aged the greatest. But that's not to say that future Mario Karts don't age any worse. As our next game, Mario Kart Super Circuit, is for sure giving us some very classic tracks that I'll be really excited to cover. So with that, I hope you guys enjoy, and I'll see you guys next time. Also, thank you for 100 subscribers, yay!